Okay, well, everybody, guess what? Let's go ahead and get started because I want to honor your time, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our special guest today. My name, everybody, is Mrs. Nguyen. I'm a college and career counselor with our district, and I work with high school students usually, so I'm so excited to be here with you, 4th and 5th graders, today. So today we're going to talk about becoming an EMT with Mr. Johnson, who is an EMT instructor at the district, and he teaches our high school students. And he's going to tell you all about being an EMT and also all about the class that you can take one day, okay? So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and go over some very basic ground rules with you so that we have a really awesome, productive session today. First of all, we're going to keep our microphones muted so that we can listen very carefully to Mr. Johnson as he tells us about his role as an instructor and an EMT, okay? Secondly, all attention on Mr. Johnson. He's devoted a lot of his time to prepare for today, and he has a lot to tell you, so let's give him our full attention. And at the end, we're going to open it up so that you can ask him all the questions that you have about being an EMT, okay? And with that, I'm going to let Mr. Johnson take it away. Mr. Johnson, if you will.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Good morning, boys and girls. It's nice to see all of you. And I have to say, it is so fun and exciting to see everyone wearing their pajamas. Because
Mr. Johnson, this is Beth Ewing. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Boys and girls, I don't want you to use the chat. There's no reason for you to be using the chat unless the teacher or the director's asked you, okay? So I know who's doing it because it shows me your names. Please stop.
I'll turn it off, Miss Ewing.
All righty. So I was just going to say that it's nice to see all of you in your pajamas. I'm a big believer in being comfortable when you're at school. Is everybody comfortable this morning? Yeah? All right. Well, my name is Eric Johnson. I'm the EMT instructor for College and Career Advantage. And we teach all the high school classes and even a couple of middle school classes. And I wanted to introduce all of you to the class that I teach. I teach EMT, and that's the short way of saying Emergency Medical Technician. By a quick show of hands, can you guys all show me how many of you have seen an ambulance before? Wow, okay, so pretty much everybody, right? Everyone's seen an ambulance before. How about a fire engine? How many of you have seen a fire engine? Of course, everyone's seen a fire engine. Did you know that all of the firefighters here in our communities, as well as all the folks that work on the ambulances, they're all EMTs? Yeah, they're all EMTs. And what's really neat is that normally you don't take those classes until you're way, way, way older and you're in college. But we have an opportunity to teach you how to be an EMT when you are in high school. So I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to answer all of your questions. But I thought that it would be really fun to start with a video showing you just a tiny, tiny bit about the ambulance that I work on. Because in addition to being a teacher, I also work on the ambulance still. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share that video with you. And I made this video. Today we're going to take a really quick look at some of the cool features of my ambulance. Yikes, sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share the video with you guys so that you can see all about the ambulance that I work on. And then you guys are more than welcome to ask any questions that you may have. And you can ask about the video, you can ask about the class, you can ask about all the fun equipment that I have laid out here. Anything that you may have, I'm more than happy to answer. So let's go ahead, we'll jump over to the video, and we'll go from there, all right? Thank you very, very much for being patient. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Today, we're gonna take a really quick look at some of the cool features of my ambulance, Rescue Ambulance, or RA2912. Lots of doors and extra stuff on the side of the ambulance here. Let's head on to the back. Now, all of the work that we do really occurs back here. So this is what I like to call my office for the day. You can see our gurney right here in the center, and what's kind of neat about this particular gurney is that it does all of the lifting for you. How? Well, it's kind of magic. Let's check it out. First, we'll press this release button, and then we're going to pull the gurney out. Now you can hear that there are already some motors and things starting to whiz and whir. This device is capable of holding up patients up to 700 pounds. And yes, we do have some patients that weigh up to 700 pounds. So this machine does all the lifting for us. By pressing a button, the legs are extended and the brake on the rear is released. one more button press, and we're ready to go. And just like that, our gurney's it's actually out of the ambulance. Now it goes up and down on its own too, so we don't have to lift the patient once we get them on. We can go down, and then of course, we can go back up. Well, what's really nice is when we're loading the patient into the ambulance. Now typically this is where we have the most stress and strain being placed on our backs because, well, it's hard lifting all this weight. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna press this button. And you can see that the gurney does all the lifting. Now all I have to do is push it in. I don't even need to hold it. And it does the whole thing itself. We have this striker gurney as well as this striker stair chair, which we'll hopefully talk about in some further videos, and definitely if you join my EMT and EMR classes. So let's take a step over here to the side of the ambulance, hop on in. I've got some of my personal protective equipment, also known as PPE here, but I'm gonna move it out of the way. We're gonna put that off to the side and we're gonna look at some of the other equipment that we use. Pretty much everybody watching this video knows what this tool is. This is a stethoscope. And this stethoscope allows me to listen to a patient's blood pressure, listen to their lung sounds, and even, if I need to, listen to their heart. I've had this stethoscope since I was in EMT school, all the way, way back in a time when you probably weren't born yet. All right, so that's the end of the video. I did have a lot more to share and show with all of you, but we have a limited amount of time, so I had to cut a lot of it out, and I do apologize. But I wanted to show you that we get to operate in the back of these ambulances, and sometimes we work on the fire engine. Sometimes we even work in areas where there are no fire engines and no ambulances. So we have a lot of different opportunities that we can use when we work as EMTs. Now, I could sit here and talk about EMT all day long, but I think a lot of you have some interesting questions. So I wanted to hand it back over to Miss Beatrice and allow her to explain how we're gonna ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. That was super cool. Can we just give a thumbs up to thank Mr. Johnson for sharing that video with us? Awesome. Thank you so much. I've actually never seen the inside of an ambulance, so that was very exciting to see. Okay, so what we're going to do, boys and girls, is we're going to ask questions now. Okay, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions about becoming an EMT, riding in an ambulance, what it's like, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to keep ourselves muted. And I am going to allow chat privileges for you to say that you have a question, and we're going to call, we can call you out from the chat if you want to do it that way. And I'm going to have it so that you can send it to me personally only, the chat, or you can raise your hand. And I'm going to try to hunt on the screen to pick students who have their hands raised, okay? And if Mr. Johnson sees somebody, he can also pick somebody as well. And you're going to wait for me to call on you, and then I'll ask you the question, and you can unmute yourself. And I already see that somebody, Kelly Hambrick, I think maybe Ms. Hambrick's classroom has a question. So let's start with that. Go ahead and ask your question.
How do you train your students?
That is a great question. Thank you so much. What is your name?
Kylie.
Kylie?
Uh-huh.
It's nice to meet you, Kylie. Well, Kylie, the way that I train my students is we start in the classroom, just like the classroom that you're in, and we start by learning, and then we follow up by doing what we call skills. So we use all of the equipment that we would normally see on our ambulance, and we practice with our hands. So it's a combination of classroom learning and hands-on learning. It's so important to do that hands-on learning that we partner up with our local fire departments and ambulance companies so I can send my students out to do what's known as an internship. So they get to go and practice while they're still students, and they do everything. They work right alongside the other EMTs and paramedics. So to answer your question, it's a little bit of classroom and a whole lot of hands-on. Thank you so much, Kylie.
That was a good question. Okay, I have another question from the chat, and it's a pretty serious one, but somebody's asked if anybody has ever died in an ambulance before.
Well, unfortunately, yes. People do pass away sometimes when we're taking care of them. But the most important thing to remember is that we train extremely hard to do our very best to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we do see that on occasion, but most of the time, the patients that we see, they're only They're only going to see us for a little bit because we can very quickly get them to the hospital and get them treated and taken care of so that they can go home. So more often than not, no.
Okay, thank you. And I see Kai has a hand up. So Kai in the brown hoodie pajama set, go ahead and unmute and ask your question, my friend.
When you like go, do you have to like help pick up to the machine? How you just click buttons? Is there like a remote that you use?
Kai, you know, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Do you want to type your question into chat so I can answer it there?
So I think Kai's question had to do with the automatic loader for the gurney. And he said, is there a remote that you can use?
Oh, that would be super neat. It would be just like a remote control car. No, we have the buttons right on the gurney. And it's important that we have them there because if we weren't holding on to the gurney, it could roll away and our patient could get hurt. I did see a student that had their hand up since the very, very beginning, Miss Beatrice. It was Chauncey.
Yes.
Is it okay if we call on Chauncey?
Absolutely. Go for it, Chauncey.
Okay.
What, like, how does it work, like, for the buttons on the rolling thing, like, when it goes out?
Well, all that we do, that's a good question. All that we do is we press and we hold the button and it makes the gurney go up. And then the other button makes the gurney go down. And then we have the system inside of the ambulance that locks on. So it finds the magnets and it locks on. And then all we have to do is press one button to make the legs go up. And then we just push it right in. So it's kind of like having like a sliding drawer. Some of you have sliding drawers at home. It works like a sliding drawer. Good question.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat box. I'll just hit you with two. What school do you teach at? And also, is EMT a well-paying job? So they're asking about average salary for somebody who is an EMT.
So we'll go in order. I teach at 3 high schools. I teach at Capistrano Valley High School, and that's where I teach 2 of my EMT programs. I teach at Laguna Beach High School, where I teach 1 more EMT school or class. And then I finally teach at Aliso Niguel High School. And that's where I'm at right now, where I teach a totally different class called sports medicine. The other question that you had was in regard to pay. The pay of an EMT depends on where you go. So I think that the best way to talk about it is the amount of hours that we work. Most adults work 40 hours in a week. And I know that all the teachers are laughing and saying, yeah, 40 hours in a week. But most adults work 40-hour work weeks. An EMT will work 48 or 72 hours, but they don't have to be at work Monday through Friday. They only go Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, or Monday and Tuesday, or whatever their shift is, because they're on 24 hours a day. So they work 24-hour shifts, and they get paid the whole time that they're there. It doesn't matter if they're running calls, or going to lunch, or sitting at the station watching TV, or maybe even sitting at the station working on homework, or this is really fun, playing video games. So we have a lot of time. And then of course we get paid at night when we're sleeping. So we work more hours than the average adult, but we also have more days off because we get paid for the time that we're not always working because we're there at the station anyway. So I would say that the pay is it's a very good question. It may be a little bit better to say that it is a great way to get a job right after you finish high school, which seems a million years away. I know that seems really far away, but it's a lot closer than you think. And when you graduate high school, you're going to be thinking about a job because your parents are probably going to say, it's time to go get a job. You got to go out and support everything that you're doing. And it's a great way for you to get a job right after high school.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Okay, we have a question from, I think, Mr. Riddle or Rydell's class.
Yes.
So if you want to unmute yourself, go for it.
What is it like when you guys are training? Is it an adrenaline rush?
Absolutely. I would say that it's an adrenaline rush, but a lot of what we do when we train is that we train in a very low stakes environment, meaning that people won't get hurt. No one is going to become more sick. So there's no real risk to anybody. The real adrenaline rush is when we take that training and we use it on a real emergency. the rush of putting the lights and the sirens on, arriving at the call, and then making sure that we explain to everybody what we're doing and hopefully making the problem go away.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We have a pretty cool, actually an interesting question that I'm like curious about as well. Let's see. Do you still help if it's a fire? So what happens if there's a fire?
That's a great question. And we also respond to fires of certain types. We have fires that happen every day that you'll probably not hear about because they're usually pretty small. Sometimes trash cans catch on fire. I think that some of you have been driving with your parents and you've seen another car on fire. But those are the ones that we don't usually hear about, because house fires and fires in apartments and in offices and classrooms, they're very rare. But when they do happen, they also send out ambulances in case there's anyone that is stuck inside that needs assistance, someone that may have been stuck inside but they're out now and they're having some difficulty breathing, or hopefully they haven't been, but if they've been burned. And then of course, we're there to help the firefighters in case they get hurt. So yes, we do go to fires.
Awesome. And Mateo has had his hand up for a while. Mateo, you've got the floor, my friend. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
How often do you get patients?
How often do we get patients? Every shift? Every single shift we have patients.
How often do you have like real emergencies and like real fires?
Oh, how often do we have real emergencies and real fires? Well, usually when people call 911, they think that they have a real emergency. And sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And that's okay, because we show up and we say, we have the training to figure out if you're hurt or if you're not, if you're sick or if you're not, or if your emergency is real or if it's not. But we always show up, and when there is an emergency, we take care of it. And when there's not, we also deal with it, and we try to educate the people that call 911 so that they know what is and is not an emergency. So we get calls every day, but the real emergencies, and you said fires and those other kinds of calls, those don't happen all the time. Those happen less often than the non-emergency type of calls.
There's a question from Denise in the chat box. And it says, does the alarm on the ambulance ever annoy you guys? Because I can hear it all the way from my house.
Well, the siren on the ambulance does not annoy us. It's usually something that we use so that we can get other vehicles out of the way. But the way that we use it, we have headsets, we have ear protection so that it doesn't hurt our ears. Mm-hmm. And what's really neat about our headset is that in addition to being able to hear our radio and talk to our dispatcher and other units that are coming by, and don't tell anyone I told you this, sometimes we listen to the radio too. So we'll have some exciting music playing and we'll have the sirens going and then we'll respond to the call.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have somebody from Ms. Hambrick's class raising their hand. So go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Have you ever had a patient that is over 100 pounds on your carriers in the ambulance?
Yes, and I know that 100 pounds sounds like a lot of weight, but most of our patients are well over 100 pounds.
I think all of us might end up being over 100 pounds by the time we're adults.
Yes,
All right.
But I will say, I think what you might be asking is, have we had any really, really big patients? Yes, we have. Sometimes medical things can cause patients to gain weight uncontrollably. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those patients have medical emergencies. And the last patient that I had that weighed over 100 pounds, well over 100 pounds, we actually had to modify their doorway to help them get out of the house. Mm-hmm. So we had to cut the doorway so we could get them out. Wow. So yes, we occasionally do see those patients and we train specifically to deal with them, but they're the same as our patients that are under 100 pounds. We give them all the attention and we make sure that they get exactly to where they need to go as quickly as possible. Good question.
Awesome. Cammie has a question. Cammie, go ahead and unmute.
How often are people like seriously injured and like you're still able to like rescue them?
Cammie, your audio was a little delayed. So can you do me a favor and put that in the chat box so we can answer your question? Can you put it in the chat? Okay, thank you. And while you're doing that, I'm going to have Ada ask her question, okay?
Okay, so my question is,
what is your schedule in the day?
Oh boy, Ada, that's a great question. My schedule during the day is a lot different than it used to be because I teach full-time now. So I spend most of my days in my classroom teaching my students or getting ready to teach my students. But when I was on the ambulance full-time, my days started very, very early. Our shift starts at 6 a.m. So that means that I usually had to be up by at least 5 a.m., if not earlier. By the time I get to work, and just so all of you guys know, we usually show up way before our shift starts. So I normally got to work by 5:30. I start by doing a checkout on my ambulance to make sure that all of my equipment is there. Once I'm done with my equipment, I check our radios, I check to make sure that everything is clean, and then I start washing the ambulance. Once we were finished washing the ambulance, we would start cleaning the station. And once we started cleaning the station, usually one person would start making breakfast. Some of you have actually been to fire stations before, and you might have heard of them as being referred to as firehouses. And a firehouse is called that because it really is just like being at your second house. We have kitchens, we have bedrooms, we have living rooms, and just like your house, we have chores. So we call them station duties, and we have to do them every single day. We also have to respond to calls while we're making those station duties happen. Another neat thing that we have is we have a gym so that we can work out while we're at work. Sometimes our gym isn't exactly what we need for the day, so we usually have gym memberships so that we can go to local gyms as well. And we also have training that we have to complete during the day because most of the time, if we're sitting around and not doing anything and not running any calls, we get really bored. And when we get bored, sometimes we play pranks on each other, and pranks get us in trouble. So what we do instead is we train. And we train for emergencies, and sometimes we train with other agencies. Sometimes we train for things that will likely never, ever happen. But we're always training. And like I said, during all of this, we're still answering calls. So usually the day is pretty busy. I would say that from 6 in the morning until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, we always have things going on. And the exception would be holidays because we work every day of the year. I've worked on every major holiday, Thanksgiving, I've worked on New Year's, I've worked every single holiday. So all the major ones.
Man. Okay, we have Cammie's question in the chat box. When people are injured very seriously, are you still able to rescue them?
Yes. Yes, we are able to help every single patient. We don't have any patient that calls us and we say, gosh, we're so sorry. There's nothing we can do. Because even when the patient is really, really seriously sick or seriously injured, we have one tool that is better than any other. We have an ambulance. We have a vehicle that has lights and sirens, and we can take them to the hospital. And there isn't a sickness or illness or injury out there that we can't at least get started taking care of at the hospital.
Emma has a really good question for you, Mr. Johnson. Why did you decide you wanted to be an EMT?
Boy, that is a good question. It's actually one that we talk about in the very first week of class because that's one of the things I ask my students. Why do you want to be an EMT? So I'll save the long story, and I'll tell you that when I was younger, I got very, very hurt. And when I was very, very hurt, I was lucky enough to see the ambulance crews that were bringing patients into the hospital. When I saw that, it piqued my interest because I didn't have a class like this in high school. So this was after I graduated from high school. I did some research. I talked to some of my friends, and they told me that EMT was something that I could take at my local college. I took the class, and it's been a very, very long time. It's been almost 13 years since I graduated and became an EMT. And in that time, I've done all sorts of neat and interesting jobs, whether it be working on the ambulance, traveling to other states and other countries to provide services, working at big, gigantic concerts, or working at tiny sporting events like football games and everything in between. So working as an EMT isn't just being on the ambulance or working on the fire engine. It can give you a lot of opportunities. Some of you may have a family member that is a doctor or a nurse, and EMT is an incredible way for you to start on that process. And I can tell you by experience that that is the way to go because my wife recently became a nurse and she started as an EMT.
Oh, awesome.
So there are many, many pathways to take after becoming an EMT. It's what we call a stepping stone career.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions, and I'm so sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but I'm gonna start with Evelyn, and after that, we are gonna finish up with Mr. Riddle's class, because somebody has a question in there. So Evelyn, go for it.
What if the ambulance got caught on fire?
Oh boy, what if the ambulance caught on fire? Well, it's a good thing that doesn't happen very often, but unfortunately it has happened because we have a lot of electronics and batteries and equipment, so we carry fire extinguishers. So hopefully the fire is small enough that we can put it out really quickly, but if not, it's just like hopping out of a car real quick. We usually just go and try to move away so we don't get hurt. Good question.
Awesome. And then finally, we have somebody from Mr. Riddle's class, or Rydell.
So, is it is it hard doing your job, and where do you sleep, and do you often get to see your family?
Okay, so I'll answer all 3 of those questions. Question number 1, is it hard to do the job? Well, I think that the job it's hard in the sense that you have to practice and you have to put in a lot of effort, but it's a lot of fun. It's an exciting job to have because every day that we go into work, we don't know what is going to happen. The next question that you asked was, where do we sleep? Like I was saying before, our stations are just like the fire stations. We call them a house. So we have bedrooms. Sometimes it's like a dorm. So a dormitory where we have a lot of beds, and usually we have something to divide them up to give you a little room. But sometimes we just have beds all in one room and we all hang out together. Other times we have individual rooms, and those individual rooms will have desks and they'll have TVs, and sometimes people will leave their own personal effects in there to make it feel a little bit more like home. And I think that that's a perfect way to get into your very last question. Do I get to see my family a lot? Well, my family and I do as much as we can to see one another. And my family, because I just got married a few weeks ago, my family's a little bit different now. My wife works as a nurse, and she works in an emergency department at a hospital in Newport Beach. So we work different schedules. She works 12-hour shifts, and she usually works at night. And normally when I'm teaching, I teach during the day. But we try to make time over the weekends to spend together. And then, of course, we try to find time when we are on school breaks or when we have a little bit of extra time over the summer to spend time going on vacations together. But what's really nice is I have my computer and my phone, and we do a lot of FaceTiming and texting, and we call one another so that we can stay in touch. But even though I don't get to see her all the time, if I was back on the ambulance full time, I would definitely have a picture of her, and I would definitely spend a lot of time reaching out just to tell her how my day was going and to see how things were at home. So good question.
Awesome. Mr. Johnson, thank you so much. Just to recap, everybody, being an EMT sounds pretty cool and exciting, right? Who here thinks that they might consider taking the course or being an EMT one day? Is this something that you've ever thought about? Any hands? We definitely see some interest here. Definitely,
wow,
right?
So many of you.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be open to having a flexible schedule, right? But you can become an EMT right after high school, which is pretty exciting to know. And it sounds like a very exciting job for somebody who's up for that kind of life and that excitement and the flexibility of schedule, right? So can everybody just say thank you to Mr. Johnson? We can give a thumbs up, we can give jazz hands, you can do a boogie in your pajamas. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. This was super informative. My fourth and fifth graders.
I did see a lot of hands that were still up, so I wanted to see if we had a way to have those students submit their questions, because I would be more than happy to answer them offline. So 100%. I can type response to your question.
Absolutely. So, everybody, I'm going to put a form in the chat box, okay? And if you have a question, I want you to fill out this form for me, and I promise you that we will get your questions answered, okay? So I'm going to put that in the chat box, so bear with me for a second, and I'm going to get that to you so that you can answer, you can have all of your questions answered, okay?
And I'll tell all of you what I tell my students. There are no silly questions. There are no questions that I won't answer. Just make sure that your question is something that you really, really want to know, because I will answer it.
And do
But
me a
it was-
favor when you fill out this form, everybody, put your email address or something so that we can contact you and answer these questions, okay? And that way we know who to direct this to. But that's the form. And I actually send out this form before every Friday for your class to fill out. So use this for the next time we have a Future Friday career series, and we'll make sure to answer your questions in advance too. Okay, so if you wanted it, it's in the chat box. And with that, you are all excused to enjoy your Friday. Happy Friday. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That
Thank
was
you, everyone.
super
Happy
cool.
Friday. Have a good day, everyone. Enjoy your pajamas.
Yes. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Mateo.